Yo, what is up guys? Welcome back to another video on the Garage 533 YouTube channel. On today's video, we have a car in the shop that if you've watched videos in the past, you might remember. It's actually been in 2 now, I guess. He came to the car show, the little event I had here back in the summertime. And then afterwards, he came in for me to put on a PLM header that we ended up heat wrapping and then fix up his catback. It was a little jank how they mated it up to his old catalytic converter and old header. So I fixed up his catback for him, put on the new PLM, put some new gaskets and bolts and stuff in it, and heat wrapped it. Did a nice install for him, sounded great, worked great. It's worked good ever since for him, and now the car's back. He was doing some Raceland coilovers on it. He was able to get the front done, but he had trouble in the rear. Some of the bolts in the rear are seized. It happens all the time with Hondas, pretty much every time with Hondas, and even Miatas and other cars too. So he got the front done, couldn't get the rear done, so he brought it in to have me do the rear. He did get some wheels on the car since the last time it was in here. He did get like a front splitter on the car since the last time it was here. So he's been working on it. They're younger. Shout out to Preston and them. Yeah, they're younger. They're trying to learn. They got some tools and a little bit of room to do some stuff. So he's been, chipping away at his car. But some things he's smart. He knows better than to mess with some things, and he knew that this was just something he could bring in for it. So yeah, it's a cool ass car. It's a 2008 Civic Si sedan. A little over 100,000 miles on it. He's done, the little Mugen wing, the exhaust, the header, and the wheels. Now he's getting the coilovers done, if we can get those bolts out. Some new headlights, and the splitter looks cool. Nice Dev Sport splitter. So yeah, really cool car. Definitely what I'm into. I love my K series, love my Hondas. This is, the platform that I know best. So we're gonna try our best. I already got under there last night. I broke one chrome socket trying to get the bolt off and sprayed all the suspension in the back with some WD-40. So I went to the store today, got me some new impact sockets because I didn't have anything less than like a 17. I had a 17 impact and 19 and some bigger ones, but I needed some smaller impact sizes. So I broke down, went to Harbor Freight, got those, and we're gonna get it back up in the air, hit it with some more WD, maybe hit it with some heat. Probably definitely will, and then see if we can't get these bolts to break loose. There's literally only 2. Well, I'm not sure on the top side, but 2 or 5 maybe at the most. However it's mounted on the top side in the trunk usually isn't too bad. It's usually not too seized, but the lower one is usually pretty bad, and that's just for the shock to come out, and then the shock and spring are separate on these, so spring just needs tension let off and you can get the spring out. So if I can get the 2 bottom bolts broke loose, it really shouldn't be bad. Shouldn't be a bad install, but I know better. I cut and hacked apart all my stock suspension on my Miata because of this problem. Everything was seized on it. I've done it to 2 or 3 different Civics where I've had to buy lower control arms because of it. In the rear when things get dried, and over 13, 20, 15, 20 years, however long this car is, 13 now, after all that time of your suspension being dry and not lubricated in the back, it finally just seizes together. There's a metal, pin that goes through your shock where the bolt goes through, and over time, the heat and cold and friction and lack of lubrication, along with some corrosion, it just seals that bolt inside of that sleeve, inside of that shock. So even sometimes once you get it to start spinning, you're really just spinning that sleeve inside the rubber on the shock. And then once it rips the rubber completely, that sleeve can just spin inside the shock mount, and you still can't get the bolt out. Sometimes the threads will push it out and break it loose, but it's a pain in the ass. I've had to, like on the Miata, I literally had to hack apart the entire lower control arm and suspension and shocks, and it's a nightmare when bolts get seized. I'm sure anybody knows. All right, so I picked up a few other things. I figured I'd show you guys just for shits and giggles, but yeah, along with these impact sockets, I ordered a new tripod for my phone. This thing's like 5 foot tall or something like that. It can go up to like 5 foot, you know. It mounts it a little bit better, holds it a little bit more sturdy. It's just easier for me to move around the shop and keep my phone on this when I'm filming. So I figured it'd be a good addition. Before, I was just using like little shit like this and like setting my phone up on the table or workbench or something like that, and it worked fine, but I kind of had to use a wide angle and set it pretty far back, and just kind of leave it there. I was pretty limited on where I could set my phone to film. So now when I'm working on like the inside of a car or on the engine bay, I can kind of pull you guys up to the car and point you down into the engine bay and stuff like that. So just a little accessory basically for filming that I figured I'd show. Maybe once I get out of the box and whatnot, I'll show you guys a little bit more, but yeah, I stopped at Harbor Freight and picked up these. Their selection was pretty limited. I didn't want deep, I wanted short sockets, but this was all they had in 1/2-inch drive. So it works, but yeah, I did that. I brought some bolts from the house because I had some 14 mil shock bolts and stuff like that. I brought a 17, a 14. They're all actual Honda bolts, so in case those bolts break or something, or we mess them up too much, I do have replacements. All right, so there you have it. Nice tall tripod. Every one of these unclips, and you can set it to the next level or set it to the next level, or they go all the way up to like here. So it extends out pretty freaking far. Obviously it's not like the best brand or whatever, you know, it's cheap, it's from Amazon. This thing was like $18 on Amazon. But the reason I liked it was it's tall. It's one of the taller ones they had, and it adjusts a lot. You know, this can turn back and forth. It goes this way or that way. This can go, you know, in and out. This can spin around on here, and then even like the little mount underneath here can go on this one or this one, or you can have it on this one. It came with a little bag, so oh yeah, and it came with the little remote to record. So if I don't feel like going up to my phone and pressing record, I guess I can use that button or whatever. But yeah, it just looked, for the price, it was just a nice, cheap, sturdy, tall tripod that I can move around the shop real easily. And like right now, you're set up on it. I can aim you towards the car like this if I'm doing something on the side, or if I'm working in the engine bay, I can bring you over here, and then that way, you know, my hands are free. I don't have to hold my phone, and you guys get good angles, you know. All right, so let me show you what I've been messing with on this Civic. So a good idea when you're trying to get bolts loose is to mark them. So that's why you'll see my white line here, and then my other white line, focus, down here. And you would think that's a good thing, that the bolt is broke loose, and it is. From the backside, it has come out of its threads there. It is loose. The bolt would come out, but there is a metal sleeve inside where the shock goes, and it gets seized to that metal sleeve, and then when you try to pull it out, the only thing holding that metal sleeve in is the rubber inside of there. So with that much force, I mean, I had the big boy impact cranking on it, humongous extension, breaker bar cranking on it, and even all the heat and WD-40 in the world is not gonna get this to unseize from that bolt. So what happens is, when you start turning it, it just rips the rubber that holds it into the shock out. So now the shock's doing nothing. It's just in there. It's all wallowed out, and that sleeve's just in there spinning. The shock's not holding that sleeve still. The bolt is now spinning, and since it's threaded on the backside, it's trying to push that bolt back and come out, but the sleeve's not letting it. So if the bolt was longer and staying in the threads, if the bolt was longer and it was staying in the threads, it might have enough force to push it that way. But the bolt's not long enough. So what happened is it got to the end of its threads as it was coming out, and then just slipped off to the side and started pushing that piece of metal, basically this other side, out. So now the bolt is just basically, where it threads through, the bolt tried to back itself out, but then now, since the sleeve won't let it, it's just sitting there on the bracket and just kind of like pushing against it and just spinning. Since you're loosening it, it's just spinning inside of its thread hole. It would be like this here, it's just sitting here doing one of these things. It's not pushing itself out. So like I said, maybe if that bolt was long enough, it might force itself out, but I doubt it. This is a lose-lose situation. These bolts on suspension like this, especially like lower shock bolts and stuff, are always, I've never got one to break free. I've never got one to be easy. They always just get hacked apart. If you have like an EG and you want to get coilovers on and it's never been touched before, they're just going to tell you buy newer lower control arms, buy new ones, because the whole shock and lower control arm is going to have to come out together. You'll never get these types of bolts out. And then on this side, somebody had already messed with it and started to strip the bolt, and I got a lot of force put on it. And again, I could see from the backside, I put my finger back there and felt that that bolt was spinning. So it was spinning in the threads. The only difference is I couldn't put enough force on it to break. It wouldn't break the rubber like it did on that one. So the rubber in the sleeve is still kind of attached on this side. So it was just stopping the bolt and just like flexing the rubber. I couldn't put enough force on it like I did on that side to just rip it, which isn't really a better situation or anything. It just opens it up to give me a little bit more room. Like on that side, I could stick you guys up in there and you could see a big gap. So it gives me a little bit more room to get the grinder in there, and just to move things around. But the good thing is the bolt's not seized in the threads. So you could just go down, take the wheel off, take the caliper out, go down the sides. You can even cut the shocks here and go down the sides with the cutoff wheel, cut both sides of the bolts off. The shock will be out of your way after that. This side will be out of your way because it'll just fall out. The only part that'll be left is the little part that's threaded in on this one. This one's all the way backed out, so it'll fall out. But this one's still in the threads, but you'd have a little chunk of it that you could get onto. If you had to, cut a little slit in it for a screwdriver, or probably just come out with your hands because it is free. Like on my Miata, the bolt would not move from the threads. Like it was seized basically all the way through. So even once I cut the shock out and everything, I still had to drill out the threads because that part was not coming out. But at least on this car, it would come out if he has me do it. I'm in the middle of texting him. But yeah, you can see where this was just spinning and just wearing away there. That's the metal that it was just spinning on, basically. It's just spinning in place. There's nothing. Now that it's came as far out and it's out of the threads, there's nothing anymore to like push it through. And trying to get something in from the backside wouldn't work. Like, this was just my shot at trying to see if they'll break loose and come out like they're supposed to, and they're not. So this is all I'll do. I'm not gonna fuck with it anymore. I could tighten this one back up and it'll be just like it ever has. It'll just be how it's always been. So no harm, no foul, basically. So I wanted to try this, let the customer know, and then see where he wants to go from here. See if he wants to dive into the cutting them off, which now that I broke both bolts loose, I'm pretty confident that I could take both wheels, both calipers off, cut it all apart, and just put it back together with new bolts. So we'll see. In the next clip, we'll know. All right, so I didn't film myself cutting just because with the rotor and stuff here and trying to get the camera angle right with me sitting right here to get in here, you wouldn't really be able to see much. I would have been in the way, all the metal shavings and sparks flying off the grinder and whatnot. So as much as I am trying to use my new tripod and get you guys some better angles and whatnot, I just couldn't do it today either, just because I was kind of in a rush. But I wanted to get these things out and make sure everything was good before, in a timely manner, before I kept going. So I talked to the owner, and he said, you know, go for it if you think it's not going to be too bad. And sure enough, it wasn't too bad. I had to move the caliper out of the way, which is good anyways because he needs pads. And I saw when I was getting the coilovers out of the trunk that he has them, so I'm going to get his pads done for him. I think he was kind of procrastinating it maybe, or tried to, because they look like they have a little grease on them. So maybe he tried and failed or something. I don't know, but got the caliper out of the way. I'm going to do the pads on it just because I've already got it apart. On this one, you know, the bolt had backed out of this side and was just spinning in that hole. So it was free. So I was basically able just to cut it on this side. It kind of bent them both when it was backing out of the threads. So basically with a pry bar, I was able to just pop that side up out of there and then knock the head of the bolt off, which was this. So the head of the bolt was in there, and then this was the part where I cut it, and as you can see, that bolt is still stuck in there. I tried to hit it out too, and you would never get that out. And then basically on the other side, it was a little bit different. So on this side, it this part in here hadn't broke free on this side, but it still wasn't coming out. So it kind of worked out a little bit better because it didn't end up bending the bracket at all. But what I had to do was chop off the top where the shock holds it on, and then cut this side off, if it'll focus. Cut the head off, which left this still in on that side. So like I was saying earlier in an earlier clip, it was good though because I knew this was moving. It was just like going left, and then the rubber would make it go back, and it was doing this when I was really putting tension on it and stuff, and I was feeling back there to feel if this was actually moving. So I got lucky. You know, I cut it off of this side so that I could get this out, and then I was able to knock this one out, and this just was in the threads, you know, about that much. And since it was wiggling back and forth, I figured it might not be too bad to get out, and sure enough it wasn't. I got onto it with some vice grips and just slowly spun it out, and it really didn't give me any problems. It was a little bit slow going just with vice grips, but wasn't too bad. So I got the threaded part unscrewed, Got the center part of the shock out since it was cut on both sides, and like I said, you'll never get that out. And this is the problem. This metal sleeve of the shock is the problem. The bolt gets seized to this. And then when you go to start torquing it out and you're hitting it with the breaker bar, it's just flexing this rubber inside of there. And then after a while with heat and everything, this rubber rips and this is just free to spin. But since the bolt can't come through that sleeve, it just, if you understand, you understand. If you know, you know. Here's the new shocks. The new part of the coilovers are over there. But yeah, basically, if you've dealt with this before, you know. That bolt gets seized inside of the freaking sleeve of the shock there, and it just never, I guess this is a good example. You know, the bolt gets seized to this. It's not like it's seized into the threads or onto the mount or anything like that. Like that bolt was moving, but it was fighting this rubber, and then eventually it just tears that rubber and just spins inside there. So if you know, you know. It's a pain in the fucking ass. I'm glad we got it out, but it's not the easiest thing in the world. So if you're doing coilovers on a car with some mileage, with some age, and you don't know necessarily exactly how well the stuff is under here, be cautious of this, because you may have to take, you know, the caliper apart, cut some stuff apart, get some new bolts, and really struggle a little bit. So just be careful. Now I have to get up in his trunk, undo this top bolt here so I can get the rest of the shock out. I popped the spring out on that side. You just pop the spring out on this side and then put the new ones up in, set the height, get the new shocks in. I got to bend this bracket back into place a little bit, and hopefully one of my bolts works for it. Throw the new brakes on, and that should be it. Hopefully that's it. I could run into still some little stupid problems, but you know, that was the hardest part. I got the hardest part out of the way, I think. So we'll see. I'll pick up the camera. Maybe I'll film myself putting it back together, doing the brakes and stuff. We'll see, and try to get this thing done. Alright, so got a little ahead of myself, but wheels are back on, brakes are done. Got everything greased real well. That is $20 a bottle Permatex ceramic brake grease that I use on everything. His e-brake and his caliper were like almost seized up. So e-brake, caliper, all that got greased really well. On this side, I literally had a perfect bolt to fit, right length and everything. Tighten it up, marked it. Put the factory bump stop washers and little spacer off of the old shock on the new one. So here, when you pull this apart, you'll have, you know, the orange bump stop. You'll have a washer. You'll have a washer for the bump stop, and then a washer for the spacer, and then the spacer will come up to about, well, I guess you can see it, the dirty, you know, clean and dirty side. There's a punch hole in it that you have to drill out in order to get that off of here. It's kind of stupid. Raceland, cheap ass coilovers, they should just include a freaking spacer so you don't have to drill that out. getting the new shocks in was a pain in the ass. Like, these threads are super long, so I got my little 90-degree impact tool. If I didn't have that thing and the impact and had to do this by hand with a wrench and an Allen wrench, one turn at a time, it'd be a pain in the ass. But with that 90-degree tool, you can use an impact to do it and just hold the nut with a wrench. So when they're in the car, get you one of those, use an impact, get the nut off, pull it out. The top bushing will probably stay in the car, and then you'll have the spacer, drill that out, pull it off, put it on the new one, like 2 washers and the bump stop. Raceland didn't say anything about the bump stop, but I put it in because why not? And then you end up with it looking like that. So you can see the spacer above that washer just a little bit, and that spacer goes through the bushing up there. And then you come down here and you got the coil sleeve things. It has to like get some weight on it for it to seat, and so the suspension can go like this. It'll pop in place right there. But I got about the same distance on each side. You know, marked my tight bolts, lubricated everything real well. Oh yeah, I did reuse this rubber piece here too. Raceland didn't say anything about that, but I'm pretty sure you're supposed to reuse that thing. So reuse that off your old spring. It sucks too because you have to hammer this down into here. As you can see, it like seats all the way down into the bottom of this thing right there. So you have to hammer this thing all the way down in here, and when you have corrosion, like on these 13-year-old cars that they sell coilovers for, it doesn't fit the best. And trying to get a hammer, it's kind of a pain, but make sure you get those hammered all the way down in. I took a little tool, a little sandpaper tool on my drill, cleaned out this side, lubricated it up, smacked it in. Like I said, brakes are all done, e-brake's good and greased. The threads on this are super greased. Collars are at the same point. There's not like a way to lock those collars either. It's just one collar, so I don't know how that's supposed to work, but as far as their coilovers go, they're in, they're done right. Wheels are back on. Brakes are done. So we're gonna see what this thing looks like when it gets on the ground. It's a new day. Owner's coming to pick this thing up, and she's all good. The Civic is low in the back and all fixed up. Coilovers are all good to go. The ride height's a little off, but not too bad. He'll have to adjust it a little bit and just play with it, get the ride height right. He's got to lift the front anyway a little bit, but give it a once over, make sure it's good to go. But I gave it a good test drive. Everything seemed right, so yeah, we tightened up his mount in the front, hacked apart the back shock and those rusted bolts, did the rear brakes. Yeah, and they're about to pick it up, so I'm gonna get it ready to go and get it out of here. But yeah, this is the back height. It is like a little lower on this side than the other side, but like I said, he can mess with it. He's got to lift the front a little bit anyway. The front rubs just a little bit and it pops out the bumper and it's kind of tearing up the inner fenders, so he'll have to decide whether he wants to keep those. Yeah, that bumper likes to pop out when it rubs too. This side's a little bit lower, but everything turned out good. Kind of see him back in there. So yeah, another job well done on this car. And like I said, I like working on these things. These are, this is my type of car. So this is what I prefer to work on. Hondas and stuff are great. So yeah, that'll probably wrap it up for this video, guys. I appreciate you for watching. As always, hit that like button or subscribe button, leave us a comment, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace out.